Joining me now on set is Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today, Svante Myrick, former Democratic mayor of Ithaca, New York, and president of People for the American Way, and Rick Tyler, Republican strategist and an NBC News political analyst. So, Susan, I want to play for you something Don Bacon told us on this show yesterday about the impeachment inquiry.
If this is perceived as being a revenge impeachment or a politicized impeachment, and as you say, all impeachments have political aspects to it, but if it's seen as being as a political weapon, it will hurt the Republicans. If we don't handle this right, and if it looks like we're using it as a political weapon, we'll come back to bite us. So,
yesterday, that's not the point. The point here is, do you think that is Don Bacon's timeline wrong? Has this already become irrevocably politicized? Not a single Democrat voted to start this process. What say you?
Well, and also, of course, they went ahead to approve this impeachment inquiry without actually having any evidence of wrongdoing, which seems backwards to at least Democrats. So, yeah, the history of impeachment does not it has not served well those who do the impeaching, Clinton being the best example of that.
To that end, Rick Tyler, what do you make of the theory here that it might be better for Republicans to never have a vote on impeachment, to just leave this as kind of an open-ended thing hanging out there, more like the Benghazi hearings than like an impeachment with a teleological end to it?
Well, I'll go back to your point that we're irretrievably attached to it. And I really think that people get tired of using government like serious. There is a process to remove a president, and it's called impeachment, and it should be for serious matters. But I think it's more than just a political stunt. I actually think it's dangerous because you do not want to live in a world where, I think Garrett robbed the grocery store. Well, I don't have any evidence that he robbed the grocery store, but we should arrest him because, after all, I think they might, and then we'll go about trying to prove. We don't want to live in a world like that. And if there is evidence, then go ahead and bring the evidence and then let the chips fall where they may. But if there is no evidence, it is going to be seen as a political stunt, and I think people are going to get really tired of that kind of behavior.
We may talk about grocery prices later in this segment, ironically. But Svante, what do you make of this? I mean, Bacon says he doesn't want this to be a revenge impeachment. But to Rick's point, I mean, how do you break this cycle of, kind of tit for tat? You guys went after my guy, so we're going to go after your guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way you do it is by electing more reasonable and responsible people. Those are two words
but what else?
that are not...
What's your second best idea?
Not currently, failing that in the House GOP caucus. I think they just need to see the consequences of their actions at the ballot box. And I think that they will. I mean, look, President Biden won in 2020 in large part because he seemed delightfully, wonderfully, refreshingly boring. Seemed responsible and boring and dull in a way that after 4 years of chaos, we really embraced as a nation. And Hunter Biden was then who he is now, a troubled young man with serious addiction problems. The entire country knew about it then and still voted for Joe Biden because they knew that the biggest crime Joe had done was to be a loving and caring and supportive father. Now, this is not going to work to the Republicans' favor. I think most of them know it. I think certainly the Senate Republicans know it, and they're trying to urge caution. But the problem is that in the midterm elections in 2022, and in, frankly, every cycle of elections since at least 2010, the Republican House caucus has gone further and further away from the mainstream. And without reasonable people in that caucus, they will continue to damage themselves and their own political futures.
They may find that to be the case. And while we'd all like to believe 40 is still young, Hunter Biden was in his 40s when all this was going on. He wasn't a college student or anything, but your point is well taken.
Young here being respective relative to the president and former president's ages. Yeah.
So the idea of a president who you could ignore, like sort of part of the Biden strategy in 2020, but in 2024, he needs something else. And I want to ask you about something my colleague Sahil Kapoor wrote. He talked to Florida Democrat Maxwell Frost, a couple of younger Democrats, about what the president needs to do, the idea that he needs an actual agenda. Frost told Sahil, well, we have to talk about what are our plans for 2025, 2026 and beyond, and how does that fit into this future we're fighting for? I think that's really the key right now among young progressive voters. If you asked the Biden campaign what their goals are for the second term, what would they say?
Yeah. And, this is in contrast to former President Trump, who's been pretty clear on what he would do.
He's put out a ton of policy, actually.
And he's talked about his first priorities and being a dictator the first day and what he would do then. So Trump has been very clear on what his agenda is. Biden has not, other than saying he'd like to continue some of the policies he's pursued this first term. I think this is a problem for them. I think it's part of the act of energizing your supporters is telling them what you actually want to do if they give you their vote.
Rick, I thought Donald Trump was the ultimate turnout machine for both parties.
I think he probably still is.
Yeah?
But there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, I don't feel like I have to defend the Biden administration, but you know, the world is thus, right? Biden didn't create the problem in Ukraine. He didn't create the problem in Israel, and he's dealing with those things, and those are the focus. And the fact is, with no offense to my colleague, a lot of what the progressive left wants to pursue, the American people do not, and Biden is smart enough to know that, which is why he doesn't take on those issues in full-throatedness that they would like him to do. But you know, what's the answer is to what? Elect Donald Trump? I'm not sure they're going to see it that way.
Sure, but to that end, Svante, can the Biden campaign, can you make the case for Joe Biden in 2024 without saying Donald Trump?
Yeah. No. Yeah, you can.
Is it really
you
that
can.
simple? Yeah.
Well, you can, but also the good news is that you don't have to, right? Donald Trump will be the opponent. And I actually think the sooner that happens, the better. Congressman Frost is absolutely right. The Democratic Party and President Biden have to put a proactive agenda out there. And they have to do it as soon as it becomes clear, and hopefully it's becoming clear to the entire nation that an investigation is not going to stop the Trump train. An indictment's not going to stop the Trump train. He is not going to be removed from the ballots. And so the only folks, if you want to stop Trump from becoming president again, you have to get engaged and involved as a citizen and as a voter. And that means making a choice between the two folks who will be on the ballot. And it is becoming increasingly clear. Those two people will be Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Yeah, you know one problem? Not two folks on the ballot. There are going to be like 5 folks on the ballot who are serious candidates, names people are going to know, alternatives they can vote for if they aren't so enthusiastic about either Trump or Biden.
Yeah, Rick, what do you make of that? I mean, when we talk about the idea that it's gonna be Trump, there is still there's one possible X factor that hasn't happened yet, and that's a conviction. And as our lead story indicated, that seems less likely now than it did 4 hours ago. But what does a conviction do to this Republican primary that your colleague is so sure is over?
We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what the conviction will mean. I, by the way, don't think that Jack Smith suffered a defeat today.
No?
In fact, no, because the Supreme Court could have said, in fact, no, you don't have the right to convict a president while he's executing presidential duties. That had been decided by a different court. They didn't overrule that. And there's an expedited process for the lower court to deal with it. So I think we will get some movement or some clarity on Mr. Trump's future. What I don't understand is when you look at the January 6th insurrection, I don't know what else to call it, and the thousands of arrests, the convictions, the people who are in jail, the phone calls, the obstruction of justice, Rudy Giuliani, and the libel case, you have Trump lawyers who are now pleading guilty, and all this is going on, and Trump somehow, he's Mr. Innocent. Like, he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything wrong. Yet they weren't here for anybody else. They weren't here right across the street for anybody else except for Mr. Trump because he called them here. And so something should move, and something should move fairly quickly. I understand that the wheels of justice grind slowly, but it hadn't for the people sitting in jail right now.
What do you make of the fact that the sort of general rules of electability on Trump have just not applied here at all? Given everything, I mean, Rick Tyler, in our Republican seat here tonight, is telling us that, you know, exactly what he thinks about this, but there's been no political gravity for Trump in this primary.
Yeah, I have many thoughts, and actually,
Give me one, because we're basically out of time.
Since 2015, I have said to myself hundreds of times, surely this must be it. Surely, 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 he could not survive the scandal. And yet he survives and thrives because he's protected by an enormous media ecosystem, his own cult of personality, and his own celebrity, enormous celebrity, that he carried into his political career. The only people that have ever turned him back are those 70 million plus people who turned out to vote for Joe Biden in 2020. That's the only thing that will stop him in the future. Scandals won't do it. Indictments won't do it. We're going to have to do it.
A refreshingly honest pre-Christmas panel here today. Susan, Rick, and Svante, thank you all for coming on.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.